Hi there, and welcome to this episode of Heard Online, in which we will try to make sense of Oliver Alves' story. Now, before we get into this, I just want to say that this episode is uh, one on the heavier side. We're going to discuss some difficult topics, and if that's not something you would like to hear about or learn about, then this particular video is not for you. I always want to bring out education that is hopeful, inspiring, and leads us to see that we can leave the struggle with sleep and have peace of mind and peaceful nights. And this one ultimately is also one where I hope we can learn something that brings peace to you and understanding to you. But again, there are some really difficult topics in this video. So, feel free to not watch this at all, or not watch this now if this is not the time. Now, with that said, a little backdrop here. Last week, I got an email from a member of our community named Simon, who said, "Hey, Daniel, I just learned that Oliver Alves is no longer with us. He ended his own life after a struggle with insomnia." And he sent a link to video, and he said there's a lot of mystery and lack of understanding of what really happened here. So maybe this is something you would want to talk about. I watched the video, and initially I thought we could watch that together here in an episode, but it was a very difficult video to watch, where Oliver was crying. You know, he was very distraught, and he was talking about his struggle, how difficult it was. And so instead, we're going to look at an article that came out recently about Oliver, and again, I hope we can understand things from his struggle that can be helpful to us all, and really learn things. So with that said, I also actually, this came up in our coaches collective today. Again, somebody mentioned Oliver Alves and said that they had seen a link to an article about him. And so let's take a look at this together. This is from a publication I'd never heard of before, Two Oceans Vibe, I think it's called. And the title is "Mysterious Condition Leaves Man Unable to Sleep for 2 Years." And the subtitle, "I used to wonder what could drive someone to wish for death. Now I understand." A very, very, very difficult, sentence to even just read. But what's said here is that most of us get a little cranky if we don't get a good night's sleep. But Oliver Alves has been living a waking nightmare after being unable to sleep for the last 2 years. Oliver has stumped doctors, neurologists, psychiatrists, psychologists, and sleep clinics around the world with his inability to nod off, with even powerful anesthetics unable to knock him out. He first joined the Wide Awake Club without any warning in December 2023, when the former train driver, 32 years old, said he simply couldn't fall asleep one night. I thought nothing of it," Oliver told the Daily Mail in August last year, "but the next night sleep didn't come again. Days passed, still no sleep. The strangest thing is I didn't even feel drowsy. There was no drifting off. Even for a second, my brain felt as if it was stuck in an emergency mode that would never turn off. From that moment, I barely slept at all." And I thought we could pause there and take note of how very similar this is to how everyone's insomnia story begins. For some reason, we have a night where we sleep very little, and that may not be alarming to us, but we take note of it. We think, "Oh, that was odd, but I'll probably sleep well tomorrow. That was strange, but we think nothing of it. We just assume that we'll sleep the next night." But already here, a seed has been planted. There's some concern around sleep. There is a thought of like, what if it happens again? Maybe it's not obvious to us, but in the back of our mind, there is a preoccupation now about what if we don't sleep again. And of course now, because we no longer have this effortless, like passive approach to sleep, we kind of like having this mind effort of like wondering, trying to figure things out, paying attention. We have a second night of not sleeping. And then we're wondering what's going to happen the third night. And soon enough, not sleeping has become not only like a minor concern, something on the radar, but something that is like the focal point of our life, where we're dreading not sleeping. It has become tokenized. It's become a real threat for us. And then naturally, as Oliver describes here, our brain is in an alarmed state. The alarm bells are going off. It's in a hyper-aroused state. And then the article goes on to say, despite living cleanly, exercising regularly, and enjoying plenty of fresh air in the great outdoors, this sleep issue suddenly reared its head and turned the Brit's life upside down. He claims to have tried everything at his disposal to help him slip into a slumber, from over-the-counter remedies to sleeping pills prescribed by his GP, but nothing has worked. The most powerful sleep medications are just like taking sugar pills to me, he said. Ultimately, the lack of sleep forced Oliver to give up his job as a train driver in January 2024, before he then sold his house and moved back to his mother. And again, some very, very familiar elements. Often we think that not sleeping, or even having, let's say, mental health issues, comes from an unhealthy lifestyle, that as long as we are physically active, we're getting a lot of sun, we're getting our vitamins, we will sleep well and we will feel well. But that's not the case, because exercising, getting out of sun, being physically active has nothing to do with what our brain perceives as a threat to us. So despite living a healthy lifestyle, we can still have a very difficult inner struggle like Oliver had. And of course, when we start thinking of not sleeping as a threat to us, then we're going to try to find safety. And the way we try to find safety is very often supplements, medications, pills. And we see here that Oliver describes something that's very common in our community, which is, I have tried everything, every pill, every remedy, every solution. And what we're not seeing, of course, is that we can outrun and escape a tangible threat, like a bear or something like that. But it's just impossible to escape an inner threat, a perceived threat, an intangible threat, an imagined threat that cannot be outrun. We cannot save ourselves from it. We cannot protect ourselves from it. In fact, the more we attempt to protect ourselves from it, the more it appears that there's a real threat. And not only is these proactive efforts very common, trying to do things, but also the avoidance efforts, which is that we take steps back from life. We try to protect ourselves by thinking, oh, I can't work, or I can't exercise, I can't go out. I must be really protective around my sleep and my inner experiences, my emotions. And we move back with our parents, and our life becomes really small. This is like the avoidance efforts. And I'm just pointing to, again, that this is, these are very, very common themes in our community, things we've heard many, many times. And here we see some pictures of Oliver, obviously very fit, very healthy looking young man in the first picture, and he's having some type of sleep study probably in the second picture. You can see the look in his face. He's looking like, distraught and like concerned, but tired. And you can see, and what I'm trying to say here is that the quote unquote unhealthy look doesn't necessarily mean we're physically unhealthy, but our emotional state expresses itself in our facial features and how we kind of communicate with our body as well. Let's keep reading. Some doctors have rendered him delusional, while others have ironically told him they're tired of him. One told me to go home, light a candle, and relax, Oliver claimed. Another said I was delusional. Then I was told, I'm tired of you now. There is no more we can do for you. I've been dismissed, ridiculed, humiliated. I asked my doctor, what do people with serious sleep issues do? He said they stop calling us. He was also referred to a psychiatrist by the NHS, who Oliver says admittedly he just didn't know what the answer was. Explaining the impact his sleep struggles have had on his life, he continued, I'm locked in a perpetual state of alertness. Endless days blend into interminable nights. In its torment, I'm a ghost of the person I was. Here again, some very, very familiar elements, which is that nobody understands us. That the doctor, the psychologist, the friend, the family member, the expert, nobody understands what we're going through. And this of course deepens the struggle because we feel like we truly are one of a kind, the only one that's going through this. And we feel even more isolated, vulnerable, and things become even more difficult for us. And now the article continues, sleep deprivation isn't just exhaustion, it dismantles your spirit. I've lost almost everything. The person I once was has disappeared. How can something as natural, as essential as sleep be completely stripped away? I used to wonder what pain could drive someone to wish for death. Now I understand. I don't want to die, but I can't survive this torture much longer. And of course, the torture here comes from this sense of immediate life-threatening danger that we just cannot escape no matter how much we try. Of course, not sleeping in itself makes us tired, but that does not lead us to this feeling like a ghost of ourselves, this like perpetual state of torment that comes from the inner struggle, which comes from thinking we are in danger or there's a threat in our lives. Nothing gives me pleasure or enjoyment, not watching a film. I've skipped something here. Detailing his physical ailments, he said, my joints, bones, and muscles scream with pain. I feel like I'm in an iron suit. My eyes feel like they're melting out of my skull. I can't walk in a straight line. My sight is impaired. I can't digest food properly. I cannot relate to anyone anymore. Nothing gives me pleasure or enjoyment, not watching a film, eating, or reading a book. And through every day and night, I remain awake, not even drowsy, trapped in a mind that cannot rest, cannot recover, cannot reset. It's desperately lonely because I feel like I'm the only one in the person who suffers like this. And again, this element of thinking we are the only one that has this strange ailment is very isolating. And we also see here how not only can not sleeping become tokenized, become a threat, something that grows larger the more we think of it as dangerous to us, but oftentimes other elements can become tokenized, like pain, that we all have some element of pain, but in this like hyperaroused, this threatened state, we can start thinking, oh, that is the threat as well. And not only do we have some level of pain, but it becomes really, really palpable, excruciating, a real another version of the suffering. And when our mind is in this state of like survival, that's going to be its only priority. Its only priority is going to be just immediate survival. So with that in mind, we can see that nothing's going to be enjoyable if we are in a state of survival. We're not going to enjoy food or a movie or anything like that because our mind is going to be solely, uniquely, completely focused on survival. And then finally here, consultant neurologist Professor Guy Leschziner believes that Oliver could be suffering from paradoxical insomnia, which is a sleep disorder where individuals believe they are sleep deprived despite having a normal sleep cycle. This used to be considered a psychological issue, but recent evidence suggests that what might actually be going on is that while most of the brain is asleep, regions of the brain responsible for consciousness or awareness do not show such deep sleep activity, he said. And in a way, what the professor here is describing is what we call hypersleep, where we are asleep, but there's also this hyperaroused state of mind present at the same time, so we don't perceive ourselves as sleeping. And this is also something I want to highlight, that I don't believe that Oliver went years with no sleep. And often when you hear it in his own words, he says minimal sleep or little sleep, which I think is, much more closer to the truth. Now, did Oliver, as the professor says, but potentially even have completely normal sleep as objectively measured? It's actually very possible. But what I do want to stress is that we don't lose our ability to sleep or not sleep at all. We can have that perception, but that's not actually what happens. And that's the end of the article there. And what I've tried to express here is that when I read this, I hear of someone who has exactly what we call insomnia. So I wrote here, Oliver's struggle was that which we call insomnia. It is all the typical elements of the struggle that we call insomnia. And everything we know about the struggle we see in his story, the efforts, the isolation, the avoidance, the lack of finding somebody who understands you, common elements, feeling like you're shell of yourself, that your old self is gone, that all these are very common elements. And what I also want to say here is that when we humans find ourselves like deeper in suffering, the more we try to save ourselves and rescue ourselves, then eventually we will start to think in terms of like, what's the point? Like, I can't do anything. The more I try to save myself, the more I struggle. And naturally, the thought of leaving this world will occur to us. And the reason I point that out is to say that Oliver's decision to end his own life, to me, doesn't sound like somebody who, quote unquote, went crazy or became psychotic or had a disease or disorder, but rather somebody who was deeply affected by this misunderstanding around what is a threat or not, try to save himself, get deeper and deeper into struggle, and ultimately ended in a place where all of us would end up in this situation where we just tried everything and we're deep in a struggle, and leaving this life for us would seem in a way like the only way that this struggle can end. And so we can see that ultimately his decision to end his own life, we can see it as like an extreme sleep effort, or an extreme effort to get away from what we have perceived of as a threat. Now, for a long time, this is not the first time somebody has brought up this topic of like the deep inner struggle, suicide, and said, Daniel, you should talk about this. And I've naturally felt that was very difficult. It is a very, very difficult topics to talk about. But I had a little bit of the same thing with sporadic fatal insomnia and FFI, that I didn't want to talk about it because it's kind of like those are scary topics. But when I did, I think it was actually helpful. And I hope this can be similarly helpful to kind of open this up and talk about it. And, from our own students, we have had 3 students that I know of who have ended their lives, and that was, every time it's just heartbreaking, it's devastating, it's incredibly sad. You wish you can get to everyone and really have a big impact, but sometimes it doesn't turn out that way. And like but I was having the same thoughts when I read this, that I wish Oliver had found us and found our way and found a way to peace in his life. But it didn't turn out this way. I had actually not heard of Oliver before last week. So I will just conclude here that, my thoughts go to Oliver, his family, and I hope we can learn something here that can be helpful for all of us. And then finally, I think this also illustrates that when people in our community say that this can be life-changing, life-saving, there's some truth in that. And I think that if we can help sharing more clarity around insomnia and this inner struggle, then we can save lives. I believe that it's possible. So let's end on that note. As always, let me know in the comments what you thought, and we'll go from there. Bye for now. Hi there, it's me, Daniel, and I hope you took a lot of value from the video that you just watched. Now, if you find that it's a little tricky to navigate our free content because it's so extensive and you don't know where to start or what to watch next, then consider checking out Bedtime, our app, especially if you like learning via text, because in Bedtime, we have a curriculum that I've created that gives you just a few modules every day so that you can easily find yourself on the path where you want to be, which is the path towards peaceful nights and peace of mind. So consider checking out Bedtime if it's been a little tricky navigating the free content. That is all I had for you right now. Thanks for tuning in, and now I'm rooting for you.